setting or this, we're expressing it within this context, hopefully a lot of the concepts and things that we discuss will have relevance and be applicable to problems and things you may encounter as you're moving toward your innovative self and being creative in all of those great things. And so a little about me, as Lisa had mentioned, my name is Joe Bradley. I'm in the Department of Bioengineering and also faculty with the Carlisle, Illinois College of Medicine and the Geese College of Business. The little caricature, that is me. I use that in many of my online classes as a part of some of the things that we do from an animation perspective. And like many of you, I have a lot of other interests. And it's important to also bring a lot of interests and hobbies and other things into your vocation. So even if you like and you're focused on your engineering studies and those, never forget the hobbies, never forget those things that you're interested in, and try to bring those things as elements of your complete and total personality as you're going through these learning processes and endeavors. And so along with other experiences, I actually was a part of something similar to REACH at the University of Tennessee Health Sciences Center when I was in undergrad. And so I did that for 2 years. And so I got the opportunity to do a lot of shadowing and a lot of activities that normally comes with this activity. And hopefully you'll get, once we have a little bit more opportunity to meet more in person, maybe you'll get another opportunity to engage in one of these activities and actually be in residence at a place like Carlisle, Illinois, to get the full experience. And so I had other experiences before coming to the faculty in terms of working at a few companies as an intern in Hunter and 3M. And then my first job out of with my bachelor's, I worked for a company in engineering animation and principal. And then after receiving my MBA, worked, and while I was doing my PhD, worked for a company, ARA. And now I'm working with faculty at the University of Illinois and also working with the startup, Sun Buckets, which we'll talk a little bit more detail, and I'll kind of give you an idea of what we build and make there. And if you have questions at any point, feel free, you can add them to chat, or then we can address those if you able to raise your hand. I don't see it. Maybe you can do a hand raise, but I'm not sure in this setup if that's possible, but I definitely will try to view any of those that might be in the chat. And so as been thinking about innovation, many of these learning experiences that I've had, both currently as well as just in my industry experience, sometimes you think the ideal way that you get to these innovative solutions, of course, where you are today in success, is very linear. And so you hope to be able to make strides and everything works out successfully. But what you really find in reality is that there is very up and down. And the goal is that you want to be trending upward, but there will be things that would advance you far. There will be things that would set back. But all of these will be opportunities for you to learn. And so the goal is that you utilize each of those experiences, anything that you've been a part of, these lecture series that you've been a part of, as well as things you're doing at your home institutions and involved in, make sure that you're really taking advantage of those learning opportunities, because those learning opportunities and skills that you're gaining will definitely have benefit for you moving forward and into the future. And so, and also as we think about innovative solutions, and one thing to keep you grounded in your approach to striving and driving toward building innovative solutions and addressing problems, be it in medical school or working in doing product development for healthcare-based solutions. You just keep in mind it's a continual improvement process. So you're going to just be learning, iterating, and going through those processes. And there's going to be known knowns, things that we're comfortable knowing that we know. There's going to be different principles that's been proven out, and different sets of data that seems to bear out that they're consistent. And there are going to be things that that we know that we don't know, those kind of known unknowns. And those are, and then you have those unknown unknowns. And so I just like, as you think about innovative solutions, it apply to any domain space, from being in the medical space to being in the engineering and technology or any kind of STEM domain or non-STEM domain. Whenever you're thinking about problem solving, these will be some of the things that you'll want to be aware of. And just by being aware of these could be situations or the state of information. it will be important as you're driving towards solutions, just understand that these will be factors that will influence many of those outcomes. And so really get into this idea that access to energy is also a healthcare problem is really at the fundamental space of where Sun Buckets operates. And so we see this as an issue that's not only energy issue, but a healthcare issue, and also an access to food or food insecurity issues, which reverse back and really touch base in terms of being a healthcare issue as well. And so one of the things that that we had come to know is that cooking creates problems. And these might not be many of the issues that we commonly face, but about 3 billion people cook using solid fuels. This could be dung, this could be firewood, and any other type of solid or fossil fuels. And this results in cooking from indoor exposure to polluted air, contributes to about annual death, about 4 million annual deaths, annual deaths, and it's a cause of leading cause of death for those children under 5. And so this was a problem that the team, one of our co-founders, Dr. Litchfield, had been working on this problem for many years before really coming up, and we come into a solution of this ideal of thermal storage, what I'll be discussing from the foundation and discovery and development of the Sun Buckets products. And also it contributes about 25% to black carbon emissions. And also many of these cooking problems lead to deforestation because you need the cut wood in order to create fire or to have charcoal. And so this creates kind of cascading impact on the environment, which subsequently impact health, which subsequently lead into these kind of it being energy, also being a healthcare issue. And not only does this contribute to the healthcare issues, but oftentimes we spend individuals within the community that we'll be targeting, as I'll talk a little bit more in depth about our products. The communities that we're targeting, they're spending 25 to sometimes 30% of their annual income on fuel, on cooking fuel. And whereas in the US, on our energy requirements as a total, on average, we're spending 2 to 3%, and maybe 3 to 5% in some cases of our income on energy sources. And so with that kind of inequality for these communities, they don't really have income that allow them to partake in other activities from education. And a lot of the times the collecting of the firewood is a dangerous event because you can be, while you're out there, we've learned that you can be attacked, you can be hurt, you can be injured. And so this leads to additional healthcare concerns and problems. And so being able to really address this cooking crisis, this global cooking issue, we believe that we can also have an impact and deliver something that will be beneficial to healthcare in a solution that could be successfully implemented to hopefully mitigate some of those issues. And so this is just a publication from the World Health Organization that really talks about indoor smoke from solid fuels in its assessment of the environmental burden of diseases at the national and local level. So this is a problem the World Health Organization is concerned about. And so this was the impetus of developing a solution that we have tried to bring to market and to bring into these communities through the Sun Bucket technology. And so as we thought about addressing this challenge, some of the key things we really had to think about, and as you're moving toward and being innovative and you're working on different projects and you're engaged in many different activities at your institutions, from research or from other types of activities, it's always important when you're addressing or thinking about a challenge, really identifying those key stakeholders, those individuals that will be impacted by your particular proposal or solution. And because you really want to build that right solution within the proper context. And so you only can really get that right by communicating, talking to, understanding the stakeholders, what they value, what they don't value, as opposed to just showing up with a great solution and thinking you're solving the problem. And so especially for the communities that we're working in, and primarily we'll show later, but a lot of our communities are in the refugee camps. And if I go back to this initial picture, this is one that we actually had taken when we were out in Kalabaye and Kakuma in Kenya, and seeing someone preparing ugali for dinner. And so these are, so a lot of our work happens out in those communities. And so it's very important because we do not want to be in a position that we're coming with a solution. We will solve the problem when we don't really have the proper context to understand the problem. And this works even within our Western society as well in terms of developing solutions. If you bring a solution to, even if you can claim all of from the laundry list of benefits, if you haven't established a relationship and understanding what the stakeholders value, that solution may not necessarily be adopted. And so you want to make sure that you're approaching it with the right respect for the individuals that have been involved. And then our goal is to establish a relationship between our company and the solution we're providing, as well as with those potential end users. And so we want to think in terms of what will be enabling in technology that could be utilized. And this, the chosen technology was thermal storage. And when you think about cooking, we're heating up whatever that artifact, whatever the meal, whatever we're preparing. And so going from heat to heat will in many ways be most efficient than going from maybe the way that we kind of have a system that goes from maybe cold through a chemical process and then through a mechanical process to electrical process, and then we create fire, and then the fire heats our devices, and meaning our pots and pans and cook our food. Or there's new technology in those spaces as well. So our goal was just to utilize thermal technology as the main enabling technology for cooking. And so we had questions in terms of, can it work and how, and need high temperature. So it needs to be able to be as hot as fire, because we're saying we want to cook meals. And our goal was to really combat the issue in terms of emissions, in terms of the healthcare concerns, as well as provide a renewable energy source. And one of the backdrops is that high price I mentioned of 20 to 25% cost. And in many of these communities, they run in some of the communities when you're working with, for example, a refugee camp, those resources in many cases are given to you maybe perhaps by the UN. And a lot of times, many other families when we were there interviewing were mentioning that the amount that's given really doesn't last over the duration of the time before you get the next allotment of firewood. And so any income that you will generate will still have to be used to subsidize the need for energy in order to allow you to prepare your meals and to cook for your family. And so we also wanted to make sure that we were sensitive and understood the cultural complexities and the context. I can't stress that enough. Even in any innovative effort, in any research domain, in any space that you're working in, you're going to be sensitive and respectful to the community of those end users, those individuals that will be using that technology, buying that technology, and likely to adopt it. And we want to really be respectful for how cooking was done in those locations. Now, even though we felt that we could bring a solution that will minimize the pollution risks of indoor pollution, those are the technical details. But we want to understand how do they cook. And one of the things we understood that sometimes the act of collecting the firewood, when possible, was also a communal activity. And so by us bringing this technology in and not understanding and respecting those dynamics, we're thinking we're bringing something great into the community, but in essence, it's causing another problem. And so we want to understand also why it's done that way today, how it's done today in terms of the cooking, how preparation happens. And we spend time listening, understanding the community, and then really trying to understand how does our solution fit. And you go through this process of really learning and really observe it, and you really find those nuances that you didn't think of when we were going through the development process. And one thing that comes to mind is that we run into is that our device, and I will show you the Sun Bucket shortly, when we was in the camp, we saw that their stoves was made and had a small cradle. And that cradle will allow the pots to drop into it. And so when we was out there and we saw someone that was stirring a food pot and it's locked into the cradle, they started to use Sun Buckets. And then we saw that our stove, because we didn't have the cradle design, was that pot was moving around as they were stirring. And so we worked and we figured out a solution for that. But it was just something that we didn't learn, because from our perspective, before we went into that community to really learn what was needed, our perspective was only governed by our past experiences. And so really get into and understand those cultural complexities allowed us to be able to be effective at developing that. And so we also had to think about the price and cost. Was a fair price in perspective of the market and the end users. We're proposing products and technologies for a market that probably at the price we need to get it down so it can be afforded by the individual homes and families. And so we're more or less targeting maybe the larger NGOs and those communities that would support those as our initial market. So how do we think in terms of pricing? We want to make sure we have product quality consistent if individuals in the U.S. want to buy it, to be more sensitive to the environment. We want the same quality in the same locations globally. So there was our goals that there wasn't going to be a product, it was going to be a less expensive version in one community, but we want the same efficacy, the same impact, the same value of their product in all those communities. And also what, by bringing this product or technology or solution into a community, how else do you benefit that? So if you're bringing a product, our perspective, if you're bringing a product, a solution into a market, but you also want to be impacted and be a community member. And so we've worked to try to have elements of our product that can help establish local manufacturing, job creation. So once you've taken our product and it's exceeded its useful life, all the parts are recyclable. So we thought about the construction setting up of these recycling centers that wouldn't be owned by Sun Buckets, but we want to facilitate the development of those within the community that will create jobs that allow them to be able to refurbish and refactor some of these components into other products that might be useful for the community. And so there's always these unintended consequences. So anytime you're innovating, developing solutions, solving problems, you make one solution and that solution falls out or creates perhaps a cascade of other effects. And so what happens when you introduce a solution? And this is not just only important in terms of the markets that we was targeting in terms of refugee camps. We can kind of think about what happens when you bring solutions into markets in any environment. And so in our, as we've looked through this, and so what happens when this particular technology is adopted? And so your solution could displace other businesses and structures. And one thing that we learned that by bringing our device into the community, that one thing it could displace would be those charcoal providers and the limited amount of firewood. But there is also the outlawing of firewood from political powers and influences that's impacting the community. And so if you know that there will be solutions that you will bring into a market or propose to a constituent, you want to identify who's going to be impacted negatively, who's going to be impacted positively. You want to find the ones particularly negatively, find them, work with them to make sure that what you're bringing, even though you have a great innovation, you think it's going to solve a great problem, but you want to understand who can be displaced when you deliver this solution. And by understanding that, the likelihood of adoption of your innovation will be more likely. And so this is a Sun Bucket. This is generation 2. I have in my office, I can quickly show you one of the early forms of it as well. And so in generation 3 and generation, I'll say 3-star are under production now. At the facility here, we have an assembly at the facility here in Urbana-Champaign, where the University of Illinois is located, and Carle Illinois Medical School is located, as well as we have production in India. And I'll get a little bit more in detail about some of those shortly. But we also have, that's a production of the Sun Bucket device that's been made there. So how does it work, or how does it charge? So basically we use a charging parabolic. You can basically think of a TV dish. And so, and this just have like a mylar or reflective coating. And of course, you know, the concavity of the parabola is going to, reflected light is going to go to a point. And so we place the Sun Bucket device at that center location point. And these sun rays bounce off and reflect off of the parabolic dish and heats the bottom surface of the Sun Bucket. And these 2 photos are images of an installation that we have in Haiti. And then these, the ones in Haiti were used by an orphanage that had, they were spending lots of money in terms of propane and other energy sources. And Sun Buckets was able to really cut their overall costs in terms of their energy needs for cooking, when they was using lots of propane for that. And so our device, you can charge it using this parabolic. You can store the sun's energy, this heat energy. We have a thermal storage material embedded in a device that goes through a phase change. So it goes from a solid phase to a liquid phase, and it can maintain the heat for at least 6 hours. We have a covering on there. There will be some heat dissipation or leakage over time, depending on how long you allow them to charge and just sit. But you can charge it, cover it, sit in the corner, and then you're ready to use for cooking, and you cook as usual. So, and a lot of the solar cookers, I guess you can say, that was in those communities, you don't have to make sure the sunlight was available all the time you were cooking, and you had to put it out in the sun, and you really didn't cook as normal. But you can bring this into the home, into your house where you would normally cook as though you was using firewood, which would, and we don't have the same impact in terms of that indoor pollution and some of those challenges. But getting back to the question I said, when you bring a solution into a community, what might other things might be impacted? And one thing that we did notice and observe, that fire also creates light, right? So when you burn, when the fires burn, you also have a light source. Our device heats and gets as hot as fire, but didn't provide that light source. And so now we partnered with organizations to also provide the lighting kits that you can have on our device as well as throughout their home. And that will be components of what they could use, even though we believe we have a healthier solution to also allow you to be able to cook effectively, but also in those things that will be impacted, how are we mitigating those concerns? And so this is just showing installation in Haiti, and I just wanted to play this quick. Hopefully you'll hear it, but it will show it actually working here. So this is after the sun bucket has been heated, unwind the parabolic dishes, we've removed it, and now one of the individuals is starting to use it to cook. So it'll run not a long time. So you put the oil in there, put the food inside of the pot. And so this is basically as hot as fire. So the same temperature that you can have for fire, we're getting around, I think, 350 C to 380. And so this gives you a sense of it actually in practice and working. And so we've also used it for other applications that we've have been approached to also utilize it for food drying. So we worked on a peanut project to be able to dry peanuts, because in some of these communities, the way you dry is you just lay out your harvest on a tarp or in the grass, and you just pour your harvest products there, and you'll give them time to dry. But over that time, you get significant post-harvest loss. And so we've been trying to see how effectively we could remove water content from peanuts, and we've been approached to do fish, to do a variety of different other crops and applications. So this is still an ongoing development of our drying product, and also for space heating, it could be utilized for that. And in the lab, we've tested for very low level things like charging a cell phone using a thermoelectric generator. You can place a thermoelectric generator on the top surface of the sun bucket, on that hot, black hot surface part, basically on this surface here. And you can place a thermoelectric generator there. And with that generator, it will produce electrical energy or electricity. And then we will be able to then do small charges, like, for example, a cell phone, a light, or maybe a strip of LED, like an LED light kit. And so products in where you might find some of our products in product locations would be, we have installation in the US, and if you get the opportunity to come down to Illinois, we actually had an installation of this at the Illinois Residence Hall, and they were using these for one summer. We're using this for their sustainability kitchen. And so they was able to use these to cook a part of sustainability. And we have them in other locations, in Haiti and Cambodia and Namibia, India and Kenya and some other parts of Africa, Somaliland, Chad, and that list is kind of growing. And what I was mentioning earlier in terms of we are now working on the generation 3 and 3A. So we have also established 2 subsidiaries. So the Sunbucket's headquarters here in Urbana, but we have a Sunbucket's Africa that's located in Nairobi, and Sunbucket's India in Mumbai. And these are our subsidiaries, and they're focused on, as well as on production, market, distribution, and R&D. So we really wanted to focus on in terms of innovation, being close to the markets that we're hoping to serve, and also really learning and being a part of the community and making not just the impact in terms of bringing you those communities a product, but we also want to make sure that we improve and strengthen and help in any way that we can in any other type of community-based development. Not that they are not already doing those efforts, but we didn't want to only have the sole expectation that we will only bring a product, you will purchase a product, but we want to also be a part of the community in which we're selling and developing and building these technologies and products. And so some of the lessons that we've learned just through this activity and also through other activities we've been working on. And also we're working to integrate the SunBucket technology into microgrid systems that you'll be able to charge these through maybe a heat resistant type of setup. And so we're working with some energy companies that want to establish microgrid systems for smaller neighborhoods as opposed to the enormous grid systems that we have in the US. But these could be smaller grid systems that still cover a number of homes. And the SunBucket installation will be their source for cooking. And so we'll be able to give them the same benefit efficacy of being able to cook as though they had like an electric or gas-based type of stoves. Some of the lessons that we've learned along the way in terms of innovation, it's very nice to know that innovation should be fun. And it's very intentional. So you really want to, that problem you want to solve, be intentional about the problems and solution that you want to bring in, understanding those that you will be, hopefully will adopt the technology, that everyone can and must be a part of the effort and can contribute, and also expect your innovation will and should be disrupted. Your innovation being disrupted or being displaced isn't a bad thing. It's just meaning hopefully that our knowledge is growing and we're able to better solve the solutions or better establish the solution and solve the problem. And if there was a problem created by the solution that we brought forward, maybe hopefully additional innovation, that disruptive innovation might be solving that problem in a unique way that mitigates or minimizes any newly created problems. And it's important to keep in mind it's about solving problems to benefit society. So all of the endeavors from medical school to if you're in technical or non-STEM or STEM, or they all converge in these days anyway. So the ideal is like being focused on really solving problems to benefit society in whichever venue or pathway that you feel is your vocation. And also it's important to understand innovation necessary in all sectors. And so we're focusing on innovating for a community that has food insecurity and energy insecurity. And so this is, and so you might, so that could be a sector say, oh, do they have the millions of dollars or large disposable income to be able to buy these products? It's still important to note that innovation necessarily across any sectors and not to be focused on those initially, but on really solving the problem. And keep in mind, innovation is iterative. So you'll be developing, you'll be launching, you'll be learning, you'll be iterating over that. Like I was mentioned, we're on the third iteration of the SunBucket. And each of those we've learned new information, and individuals using it will say we want to remain hot longer. And so we want to extend the capacity, or we might have questions, or we want this level of durability, or we want it to decrease in weight and size. We want to be able to have different size devices. And so just going through this iterative process on any type of effort you're working on is going to be important to keep in mind. And then anticipate criticism, challenges, when innovating. There's going to be questions, there's going to be critiques, and be willing to address those and see them as positive impact and information that's meant to make what you're working on better. And of course, creativity is going to be required to really solve those problems. And so you're going to be going through that iterative loop of developing and iterating and trying again. And then you want to keep in mind that, as we mentioned, innovation has unintended outcomes, both positive and negative. It's important to kind of keep in mind that when you think about innovation, it doesn't always just necessitate to always say this is positive or the outcome is going to be positive for everyone. So you want to understand those stakeholders once again and understand who's going to benefit, who might not benefit, and then how to mitigate and hear from those individuals, their concerns, and then how you can build those components into your solution space. And this innovation is about understanding the context. As I mentioned, understanding some of those cultural complexities in what you're designing for, and you understand the community you're building for and their knowledge. They have knowledge, they understand how they do things, and just because we think or believe we have a solution that's going to solve a problem, it doesn't necessarily work that way. And so we want to understand the context and understand its benefit, and that leads to the innovation. It's definitely a social phenomenon in terms of that if you're using a technology, and many of you, if you want to use some social media platform or a certain mobile device, it's probably influenced by someone else having that similar device. And so that's kind of social phenomenon of how innovation works and how the fusion of innovation works is always in practice there. And one of the big things is everything is connected. And so you want to focus on those connections, kind of have that 30,000 feet view, because and the reason I'm thinking in terms of everything is connected, we had to understand some of those political implications as we bring the solution into a community, and also whose position might be displaced. And so all these elements will be connected in order to really address the problem and bring a solution that will have significant impact and benefit to the individuals that you're trying to serve. And so this is basically our approach to innovation and how we're trying to innovate to address some of these concerns of the global cooking crisis. And just another side of the coin when we think about healthcare issues. And we're thinking inside the hospital, outside the hospital. And so in this case, we're saying that access to energy and some of those challenges that occur as a result of access to energy that might lead to food insecurity or poor quality of water are also healthcare issues in need of innovation as well. So that was all I want to really spend time discussing and talking about, but now I want to definitely, if you have any questions that I can address or thoughts, I would like to open the floor for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bradley. Looks like we have a couple questions in the chat.
All right, so I see a question from Sophia. So when discussing the goals and needs of the stakeholders, do we speak to community leaders, individuals, or other groups? And if each community has different needs, how do you scale the solution quickly and effectively? Thank you, Sophia, for the question. Yes, when we're in these communities, we're definitely speaking with community leaders, because at many times they're going to be the most significant influencer in the community. And we can find these not just in the refugee camps, but all over, that there's going to be key influencers in any community. And there's going to be commonalities across the communities in terms of what they want to be able to do. And some of those, and so we'll look at when we're thinking about scaling and developing the product, we're trying to, you definitely want an element of customization, but there's going to be some threads of details or attributes of the product that will be consistent. So we know that there's going to be certain types of food that need to be cooked. So we need to have a minimum threshold of that temperature that can maintain to cook these different foods. It might be foods that's cultural related, and it might be foods that's regional based. And so when we're talking to these communities, we're trying to understand what are some of those dynamics at play. And so we're solving the problem. We're doing some level of customization. So we're working directly in India and trying to understand what will be the most appropriate design artifact, what it needs to do for that community, with the core technology. So you want to have your core-based technology. Our core base is our ability to be able to pack a lot of energy density into this small form factor. And so that is what but as far as some of the attributes, the size, the design, some of the other additional accessories that we can place onto the device, it's very modular. And so when we're thinking about scaling and you're looking at the different community needs, you try to find your lowest level foundational technology, enabling technology, and figure out a design that allow you to then be able to supplement those through the accessories. And the second question from Sophia, what was the greatest challenges you encountered while implementing and creating Sun Buckets? It was basically some of the manufacturing. So we've pursued intellectual property to protect some of the design aspects, but there are certain elements of the manufacturing process that we maintain as a trade secret, because those are some of the very intricate details in terms of how to build these and for them to work consistently. And so those are some, I would say, given those some of those early fabrication, early prototype designs were some of the key challenges. And I see from Catherine, are there any opportunities for students that want to get involved in some buckets? Yes, we have interns now that's working with us as well as I speak. They're probably out at the facility here in Urbana doing some of the final assembly and some of the final testing on some of the buckets that we'll be shipping within the next couple weeks. So we've had intern students that's worked from some of the early designs, from some of the manufacturing, even in marketing, and we've had some working in accounting. And so we basically have them working across many different spaces within the company. So yeah, we do have internships and internship program that students do get involved in. So I can send you my information through Lisa, and if anyone wants to contact me directly, feel free to do so.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Bradley today? If you think of something later, or like he said, if you're looking to get in touch with him, you can always email us at the Reach email address. I just put that in the chat so that you have that. We monitor that every day, so you can reach out to us about any questions you may have later. If there are no more, oh, it looks like we have another.
Well, I do see one. Yep. Hi, Annie. Thank you for the question. Where do we see some buckets in the 5 years? We're hoping that we've really made an impact in terms of the adoption of the sun buckets in the refugee camp. We have men we're working with, and they're implementing those now because they spend a significant amount of money on in the millions of dollars on firewood and energy resources. And our device, we believe, lasts for 10 years. And once we have the device, it charges just with sunlight with the parabolic. And now we're working on microgrids where you have a solar voltaic that also charge, and you'll be able to have it completely indoor. And so we believe that it will be a technology that will be implemented, especially in those communities that's adopted more microgrids in smaller developing communities, and those that don't want to have this enormous infrastructure, which can have a microgrid with maybe a few hundred homes, maybe a few hundred to a few tens of homes. And so this will be a resource that could be applicable there. And so we believe that it will be growing into those markets, and we will also start to maybe focus on some of our sales in the U.S. We get inquiries of individuals wanting to use this at their homes to be able to cook it, especially in the summertime when they don't want to turn the stove on indoor and drive up their electric bill because the house gets hot. Because we cook just like your stove, you can also use these outside, which is different from a grill. This device can bake bread, it can do saute, anything you normally would do. And a lot of people ask us about in terms of, can we use it for barbecuing? We haven't really explored some of those things, but we can see in the future that these kind of accessories and other additions might be feasible. Thank you. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Chantel. That is a great question in terms of your questions. How do we convince the community that might not be too sure about adopting a new way of cooking? And because it's such a different way, you don't see the flames, and you don't, and you just put your hand over it and it's hot and the temperature is as fire. So how do you convince these individuals? And a lot of things that we do is we first take the devices in to have the community test them. So we work with the UN in the refugee camps, working in other communities, and we bring the product in and allow them to test it alongside their current way of cooking. And then we'll measure if you're still spending you spend some time to put it out in the sunlight. And then once you have, in the case of firewood or charcoals, once that is gone, you need to go and buy more. For our device, you just place it in the sunlight again. And after you've bought it initially, and then it's ready for you to use. And so we allow it to be compared to other solar cookers as well as other methods of cooking in practice. And so a lot of our work, so we definitely don't have the way or the strategy where we just go and sell it and then you figure it out and hopefully it'll work. We actually want to make sure that it's going to have a benefit. So we allow those types of test cases. And in the case of the US, for example, it'll be more of an accessory type of product. And so you just want to use it in the summer, and it cooks like your stove. So it's not a big, the only change or difference is that you're going to charge it from the sun. So we're not going to take away something that you use all the time. And so that is one of our methods and approaches that we use to go into those communities and work with the organizations that we're talking with and with their clients and users.
Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you, Dr. Bradley, for talking with us today. We appreciate it. And thank you for everyone joining us today. We hope you enjoyed our series. Again, feel free to email us at the email in the chat, the reach email, if you have any questions, or for Dr. Bradley, for myself, or any of our speakers this summer. Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Yeah, I see one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, we have received some negative feedback, and that was in terms of the first iteration was heavy. I think maybe around 8 to 9 kilograms, the device. And now this third iteration is much lighter. And so some of the individuals, in terms of lifting up on the parabolic to charge, and another one that we're working on, and we've had some students studying and other people studying, to just have auto tracking, especially when we move into some markets. They just want to go set it on there, and we have to track with the sunlight because, over the 24-hour day period. And so we have to track with to make sure we're at the peak of where we can get those maximize the sun rays. And so it requires you to go out and maybe do a shift every 20 or so minutes. And so and there's these devices on the market for the auto tracking. And we've now built that into one of our product offerings to be able to do the auto tracking. Before, the communities that collect a lot of firewood, many of them, because they will spend 7 or 8 hours track firewood, they don't mind moving this device 3 or 4 times until they get a full charge, because they're not spending 7 or 8 hours out collecting firewood. So that's been one of the negatives, and we've tried to work through that and to benefit that. And also, people want to last longer. They want that energy, that heat to last like 48 hours. And so it's really trying to figure out how to, is that a size thing? Is there a materials property issue or a challenge? And so trying to figure out some of those ways to do that. Or we maybe do a stove stacking where we give you multiples of these, or you might use it in conjunction with another, like you might have a small bag of charcoal. You don't use that when it's necessary, but you're using the sun bucket 95% of the time and charcoal 5% of the time. So we want to reduce some of those dependencies upon these technologies or energy technology that could create some of these health effects that would hopefully improve their longevity in life, and also give them minimize or limit their energy insecurities, thus their food insecurities.
Great questions. Okay, we'll do one last call maybe for questions. Good question, Nisa, kind of slid in there. If there are none, then we will wrap up for the day. Thank you again, everybody.
All right, everyone.
Thank
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.